but also as we celebrate the legacy of Isitwalandwe Siaparangwe Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, a former president of our movement and the first president of the democratic South Africa, and indeed the father of our nation. It continues to be a real privilege for us as South Africans to join many people around the world as we all commemorate Madiba's birthday following the United Nations General Assembly decision in 2010 to declare the 18th of July as Nelson Mandela International Day. I can't think of many people around the world who have such an honor of having their day celebrated globally. And I can't think of, many countries in the world that have the privilege of having had someone as great as Nelson Mandela walking the streets of our country with us. And it is a real honor that we need to cherish as the people of South Africa, because not many countries and not many people around the world have this type of honor. The celebration of this International Day recognizes and gives credence to President Nelson Mandela's commitment to human rights, conflict resolution, and reconciliation. It also gives us an opportunity for each one of us to dedicate 67 minutes on this special day to provide service to the people of our country through great and good deeds. And many people around the world did exactly that. And many people who did that, who set aside this time, are guided by Madiba's wise words that there can be no greater gift than that of giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return. Earlier today, I had the opportunity to be in Soweto to observe and join community members in the good deeds of cleaning up places that were recently trashed and destroyed following the outbreak of violence, destruction, and looting that is unprecedented in the history of democratic South Africa. It is clear now that the events of the past week were a deliberate, coordinated, and well-planned attack on our democracy, on our economy, and our people's livelihood. Faced with such events, President Mandela would remind us that despite the challenging times we find ourselves in, that we should keep our heads pointed towards the sun and keep our feet moving forward. He would encourage us never to give up or even to despair. And it's important that we should have that message from Madiba to guide us along the path of some of the challenges that we are facing. And he would be right in giving us that advice. We owe it to the legacy of President Mandela and all our brave forebears who sacrificed so much for our freedom to remain steadfast in the face of this well-planned and coordinated attack on our nation. In addition to protecting our nation and our freedoms, all of us must continue to stand firm against efforts to divide us, and that we must continue working together to renew aspects of how, yes, the governing party, the African National Congress, should function. And one of the greatest tributes we can pay Madiba is to renew and unite this organization that a number of you as panelists spoke about. The centerpiece of what the panelists were really saying is that there are two important things that need to be done. We need to strengthen the capacity of the state so that the state is able to address not only the security challenges that face our country, but also how the state is able to lead our country in ensuring that there is inclusive growth, that we address inequality, poverty, and unemployment. But also, more importantly, how this state does keep true to the legacy of Madiba and his commitment to the Freedom Charter. It was actually a very poignant moment when my sister said she prefers to remember the Nelson Mandela who committed himself to the Freedom Charter. Our young democracy and our movement, the second aspect, apart from strengthening the state, is yes, to renew, to strengthen, and to unite the governing party, because it is the governing party that in many ways directs the fortunes of our country and therefore must be able to do precisely that. Because our young democracy and our movement are going through at the moment a very difficult time. Our survival as a constitutional democracy committed to the rule of law is under challenge. Very serious attempts were and continue to be made to instigate the unrest, insurrection against the government led by the governing party. We cannot say that similar attacks will not be attempted in future, nor can we say that those who seek to divide us will stop in their efforts. But we can say right now, in answering some of the issues that the panelists have raised, South Africans have shown their mettle. The response of our people gives us reason for optimism and to once again marvel at their spirit and their courage in ensuring that they defend their democracy, but also much that has also been said here is to say, we want this governing party, this movement, to be strengthened so that it is able to play its important role. Now, the overwhelming majority of our people and structures and members have stood up and stood together and said, even as we face this crisis, that we will not allow this to rob us of the gains we have made in our democracy. Millions of our people have refused to be part of destroying people's livelihoods, people's lives, property, and our collective infrastructure. And I must say that we are grateful for this type of reaction, because the events of the past few days should not distract us from continuing to speed up the process of renewal of our movement. It is important for all of us to have a common understanding of what needs to be done to reunite and to renew this movement so that it can withstand this assault on our democracy, but also be able to execute the tasks of improving the lives of our people, and yes, making sure that what we've been facing over the past 27 years is addressed in a way that will take us forward. Developing a common understanding will also allow us to have a comprehensive response to the challenges before us. Now, as a movement, we've been dealing with the mandate that we were given by our last conference. And as an organization, we admitted that we had been having to deal with challenges that plagued us, divisions in our ranks, issues such as my brother Ramaphosa spoke about, and decrying the current state of our movement. Also the negative tendencies that have emerged, severely damaging the image of the ANC, and our standing in the eyes of the people, but also our weakening our ability to lead and to fundamentally transform our country. But that conference that I'm talking about resolved that our movement must restore its integrity, its standing, and it further committed to the people of South Africa that the ANC would do everything in its power to address the challenges it's facing, including corruption in both the public and the private sectors. And in keeping with the decisions of our conference to renew the ANC, we're making progress in living up to the decisions that were taken. Discipline in the movement is being restored and being enforced. The work and decisions of our Integrity Commission are being followed up and are being implemented. And we are taking concrete steps to restore the values and the ethics and integrity of this movement that plays such a key role in the life of our country. And we are proceeding to implement long-standing resolutions aimed at, yes, eradicating corruption within our own ranks, but also beginning to deal with some of the social challenges that our people face. And as we do so, we're putting in place a stronger culture that will enable us indeed ensure that we renew this organization and that we instill accountability and organizational discipline to put in place this stronger culture of service to the people of our country and to revitalize ANC branches so that they are able to execute their tasks, but also to be able to deal with the resistance that may be there to the renewal process. And some of the panelists spoke about healing, and yes, healing is also required in the ANC. At the moment, the response of our movement must firstly focus on returning calm and order to the affected communities and ensuring that this anarchy does not spread to the rest of the country. Members of the ANC and the Alliance have been integral to many of the community actions to stand against looting, and we commend community members and leaders, and I met a number of them today and the other day in KZN, today in Gauteng, in Soweto. It has been particularly heartening to see ANC and the Alliance out amongst our communities and leading all these efforts. to restore calm and order, and we urge everybody to have these engagements that a number of our panelists also spoke about. Now, these engagements that have also to go beyond just dealing with the current crisis of unrest and destruction, but also to deal with the pandemic that we are facing. Because during the course of this unrest, a number of people let their guard down. And going forward, our movement must drive a concrete program. Yes, to discourage looting and violence, but we must also make it clear that we need to adhere to the pandemic rules and regulations, because this is still a present threat of this invincible enemy that we are facing. And we should do so in a participatory manner as we engage our people as a whole. This also means that our public representatives and ANC leaders, as it has been suggested even here, local level, must be more proactive in, yes, being of service to our communities, and also addressing issues that also go beyond the current situation, that also go beyond, yes, the pandemic. We must have capable and efficient public representatives and civil servants who are able to address the needs of our people, because we have a duty to ensure that we are capable of serving the people of our country with distinction, and that we should continue improving the way that we work for our people. Now, one of the tragic outcomes of this is that violence that we face is the halting, slowing down of our vaccination program at a time when we now have, more supply, and we're increasing the pace of vaccination. Now, the way this looting was happening was such that, as I said, it's likely to increase infections, and we might see that manifesting itself as we move on forward. Now, a number of panelists have raised very important issues, and I particularly liked the suggestion that we should have Ubuntu 2021, maybe launch that. And that is something that obviously needs to be done in collaboration and cooperation with a number of role players, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, various other formations in our country, so that it becomes a whole of society effort, where we are able to say we now need to underpin everything that we are doing with the notion of Ubuntu. And that should be aimed at addressing all the needs that all the panelists addressed. Yes, addressing the issue of leadership, that this is the time when we must provide leadership. And the leadership, as my brother Somatota was saying, should not only reside in government, it should be also beyond government, and engulf the country and get many of us to, yes, show this visionary leadership that will take our country forward in an Ubuntu type of way, where we put the interests of our people ahead of everything else. Because, as a number of panelists were saying, some of the challenges that were exacerbated not only by this unrest, but also by the pandemic, is the inequality, the poverty, and the suffering of our people. That this is the time when that leadership is required by all of us. The suggestions have been made that in addressing the needs of our people, we must be bold enough to think about interventions such as the basic income grant. A number of panelists mentioned this. Yes, it requires bravery, and some suggestions have also been made of where the money will come from. Now, this matter is being given serious consideration. It is being discussed in the governing party. It is also being discussed at government level. It is a matter that is important, as it has also been raised by a number of role players in our society. And I do believe that in giving serious consideration to it, we should also heed what our panelists were saying tonight. And I think what was also said is that this will validate our people and demonstrate that, yes, some serious consideration is being given to their lives. And this matter will and is being addressed as we move on. And in many ways, it will also speak to what Nelson Mandela stood for, which a number of panelists said. His legacy was about caring for the people of our country. It was about how the Freedom Charter can be implemented. And we welcome that. And so there's a great deal of reasoning that is being put forward. The pandemic, as well as the destruction that has taken place in the past few days, also means that we need to give practical support to our people. We need to give practical support as to small businesses that have lost everything, to working people, both in our townships and in our rural areas. When I addressed the nation on Friday, I did say that these are matters that we are giving active consideration to, and we will be able to address them, including all the proposals that have been made to us. And in doing so, we will do it to address all these challenges, the socio-economic challenges that are faced by our people, because that is really the key. The grinding poverty that we continue to see in our country requires that we should address it. We need to address the structural inequality in our economy and make sure that it becomes more inclusive. Now, the initiatives outlined in terms of the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan speak to this imperative, and more of these have already begun, to be addressed. Other initiatives have, however, not shown the results yet that we would have expected. Unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment, has the potential to contribute to the social instability, and government must therefore focus on the issue of job creation and move much faster. This is a clear message that has come from our panelists. Now we are busy doing an assessment of the progress that we are making in terms of the ERRP, which will allow us to strengthen and adapt the aspects of that program as required, particularly at this moment when the pandemic, but also the destruction that we have seen, are wreaking a lot of havoc and will make a lot of havoc in the lives of our people. So we are required to speed up these processes, and we will lead efforts to ensure that as we do this, we put the interests of our people in a better position. And a number of panelists said, this requires that as we address this crisis, that we must now utilize to democratize issues such as the disaster management. We must ensure that there's food sovereignty and build really good systems that will include everyone and make sure that there is participatory involvement, but there should also be transparency. Yes, the issue of transparency was particularly raised when it comes to how we are going to ensure that we secure safety for the people of our country. This is an important aspect because our people require certainty about their safety. How security cluster in government will respond not only to this crisis, but on a medium and longer term basis to secure the safety of our people, so that we can have what one of our panelists called just peace, but I would call it just safety. One of the key pillars of the Freedom Charter is, and Madiba himself, and the legacy he has left us, is non-racialism, and how we should lead the process of non-racialism, and how in some quarters it's been seen that the ANC has not been placing enough emphasis on leading the project of non-racialism in our country. And this becomes particularly important as we see how, and we listen to reports of increased racial tension and incidents of racial violence, especially in some parts of KZN. And we also observe efforts to fuel racial tension through social media and other platforms. And it is therefore important that the structures of our movement, and indeed all of us, must work to promote the fundamental value of non-racialism and inclusive societies, even at the worst of times. Whilst in the dock, Madiba stayed true to the values of non-racialism. He was clear that he fought against white domination and would fight against black domination. We must all strive to emulate his example and build one South African nation. Yes, of course, what has happened in Phoenix needs to be investigated. It's been suggested that the Human Rights Commission must be asked to investigate the events that have also led to loss of life and that has increased racial tension. And that is also the potential of, through vigilantism, which we must not allow to take root in our country. And those opportunities or temptations must not be allowed at all. But we must also not participate in the spreading of fake news, as one of our panelists said, and messages that incite hate and spread prejudice, and we must work to combat discrimination wherever we encounter it. And the suggestion was made that we should have possibly a portal that will deal with all these messages and ensure that those messages that are now being spread, voice notes, videos, are dealt with in a way that they don't send panic amongst our people. What our country needs now at a time of crisis is that all of us must be united. All of us must ensure that our communities are not divided. And from the ANC point of view, which is the governing party, we must make sure that the ANC remains united, and the ANC should be able to renew itself and make sure that it builds and continues to strengthen its structures to become vibrant centers of community organization and activism, because the status, the strength, and the unity of the ANC has a huge bearing on our country as a whole. The ANC leads society, but in order for it to lead society, it must be united, but it must also be united on principles, and it must also address the failures and the misdeeds that have often prevailed in the past. And this renewal must mean that the African National Congress, as panelist Ramaphosa was saying, must end patronage, must end corruption in all its manifestations. And we must develop committed and capable cadres, capable, who are fit for purpose to serve the people with integrity, humility, and distinction. And the renewal process must also mean that we must strengthen our non-racialism posture and non-sexism throughout our own organization, and be able to lead the process of non-sexism and ridding our country of patriarchy as well. But we must also be able to build a more youthful organization and embrace such things such as technology, so as to address the unemployment that currently is a huge challenge to the young people of our country. Renewal must also mean that we enhance our people's confidence in our organization. And finally, renewal must mean that we unite the people of South Africa around the cause of building a better life for all. And building a better life for all would mean that we address all the various issues that have been raised tonight by our panelists. And I must say that the issues that were raised tonight are so relevant, and they must be top of mind to all of us. Building state capacity to be able to ensure that we address the socio-economic challenges that our country faces, that we must be able to grow our economy and address also the immediate challenges, so that these challenges we've been facing. And we've been facing these many challenges of poverty, unemployment over the past 27 years. And we must now recommit ourselves. And what I'm particularly grateful for is that both community activists, our intelligentsia, and various other panelists who participated in this webinar are all united on what needs to be done. This goes beyond just giving people like myself as leaders in the African National Congress, but a number of others, a great food for direction into the future. That these are matters that need to be addressed. So I come out of this webinar enormously enriched. And we will work to return to being that leadership and the ANC that Madiba would be proud of. And we will make sure that we build a movement that is once again the first choice of the people of our country. And I'd like to end by quoting what Madiba said when he said, "I am fundamentally an optimist." And he said, whether that comes from nature or is nurtured, I cannot say, he said, part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun, one's feet moving forward. And he went on to say, yes, there have been many dark moments when his own faith in humanity was sorely tested. But he says, I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death. And I'd like to say that I remain optimistic that the many challenges that we are facing, of both a security nature, particularly in this current moment, we will be able to overcome. Of an economic nature, where we need to pointedly address the needs of our people at an economic level, to address the desperate situation that many of our people are facing at a socioeconomic level, we will be able to address them. And also be able to strengthen the capacity of the state. What has happened with the pandemic and what has happened in the past few days has shown up what I've often been talking about the capacity of the state. This moment gives us great opportunity to reflect, but to act in a way where we address and repair the incapacity that we have. These are problems that have been confronting us over a number of years. They didn't start yesterday. The pandemic and what has happened recently gives us now the platform, the urgency, and the capability of acting with greater speed. And that is why Madiba's quote about optimism is so instructive to me. But I know that we can only be able to do what needs to be done to strengthen and unite the governing party, to improve the capacity of the state, to address the needs of our people on a variety of issues: the poverty, the inequality, and all that we'll be able to address working together. These are challenges that we cannot be able to have one single person working alone to address. It requires a collective effort. And what I am heartened with is that all the panelists have spoken very, very strongly and vocally about the need to act together in a cooperative way. And I particularly liked words such as we must build platforms of truth, and sometimes hear the uncomfortable things. Like I heard some of those tonight. But that with a measure of transparency, we must be able to address the challenges that lie ahead. Deputy Secretary General, I think tonight I walk away from this webinar more enriched, and also with a more keener resolve to be able to address these challenges that face our people. I'd like to say thank you, and we've heard the message. We will heed it as we strengthen both our movement and also increase the capability of the government to address all these matters. Thank you very much.
Well, of course, that was President Cyril Ramaphosa delivering that memorial lecture as part of the ANC's Mandela Day program. We've heard from him just articulating perhaps what's been shared over the past few days. I mean, you would have seen that the president also did a walkabout in Soweto today, just in an effort to perhaps assist in the